for coming to hear our story. This is the story of the Colors of Nature. Colors of Nature has been made from the beginning with the idea to try to see what can be done in the textile industry, in the textile, to produce without the minimum pollution or with no pollution. Then has been very naive idea. I faced lot of problems to make from this one reality. Now we are a little bit more in our foods, and then I asked him, Jan, we already make the first in 95, 96. We make the first water treatment system with Jan. It was based on anaerobic technology for water treatment system. And then this time, I was a little bit unsatisfied with this water treatment system because the smell, because the colors, and then I have complaints from the neighbors. The test coming quite okay from pollution control board relative to pollution, but I was not very much satisfied. And then I thought if we can do some kind of water treatment system, even it was so good, even we can reuse part of the water. And then I called Jan, and then we have few meetings together, and Jan gave me one proposal. I'm very excited. We already started, it's maybe 30-40% of the water treatment system on. We will finish maybe 1.5 months with luck or 2. And then Jan will explain you how is the design and how it's working and all this. I am very excited. And then yes, we target to reuse 40% of the water for the first rinsings of after dyeing with natural dyes, and for the flushing of the toilets. And then I am very excited as again I said. Please, Jan.
Okay, sustainable wastewater management for small industries. I never chose that topic. I don't know how the name got there. So definitely we will talk about small industries, but like Jesus said, he is using natural dyes. He is a fantastic person. We just heard so much about the history of Tamil Nadu and how things used to be. He has been researching this since 20 years, 30 years, how long?
19 years.
How the traditional use of indigo and other dyeing things. So anyway, so it's not really an industry per se. Okay, let's move on. Next one. So just to get us into the mood a little bit, water, of course, fantastic. Everybody knows how precious it is and what a charm it is. I'm going to speak a little bit more about water in relation to the city, residential zone, industrial zone, than water in relation to areas like this. So to keep that in mind. Next one, please. And next one. So here we come to the darker side of water usages. We have a lot of pollution around us. We are even creating some pollution in Auroville. And what we see is not only to have water is important, but the quality is incredibly important. Next one, please. We see in many cities around Tamil Nadu and also India actually in general that I remember I was in Chennai 20 years ago at Revati's house. They still had a water pump in the garden for drinking water. Today, Chennai, you cannot drink the groundwater anymore. It's been polluted. Next one, please.
Is it salty or it's polluted?
No, it's actually chemical taste. It's not drinkable. So for Auroville, what does that mean? We all know that Auroville's main water source is the groundwater. We had luckily very good rain this year, so we are somewhat happy. Next one. But it is definitely a limited resource. We have had many warnings already. Groundwater table is going down. Now, when we are faced with a limited resource, we have several options. we can just use less water. It can be voluntarily. We create water awareness like you are doing now here with a meeting, and a series of meetings. We implement water saving features, special taps and faucets, low water flushing tanks or composting toilets. Or we can implement measures that are less voluntary. We install water meters and police the consumption of water, or we bill for the water that is being used in the city. Or we recycle. Personally, that is my topic today. Next one, please. So I have to go back a little bit. A few years ago, I did a study in the wastewater management for the residential zone 1 and 2. It was a big study, quite voluminous. I don't think ever anybody read it. Again, a horrible name. Next one. And of this study, I only want to point out 2 findings of part 1. This is the incredible high water consumption that we have in the residential zone, amounting to almost 350 liter per person per day. This is terrible. But we also found that some communities already use treated wastewater for their gardens, which I found very interesting. Next one. So we took meter readings from the water tower, the distribution. The study was really quite detailed done, and I came to this ratio that is shown in the pie chart. If we say our entire water comes basically from the ground, our domestic use is almost, let's say, 50% in kitchens, in bathrooms, etc. And our gardening water that we use is almost the same amount. 8% of the water is already recycled domestic water. Next one, please. Now, if we would manage to encourage this recycling of water and not using precious groundwater in our gardens, then we could have the following scenario. Now, in comparison to the earlier graph that we saw that was light blue here, our valuable water pumped from the ground used in the garden is replaced with the domestic water that has been purified. So we would end up using about 40% less groundwater in one go, reducing the per head water consumption from 350 liter per day per person to 210. Next one, please. Now, if we were to implement a system like that, of course, there is a big obligation that the water that we offer is safe for the people who handle it, that if you grow fruits and vegetables, that you don't get sick from them, and children playing in the lawns and in the gardens don't get sick. Next one, please. So in order to ensure that, we have to look at what technology to use. There's a multitude of technologies, each advantages, disadvantages. Those technical terms are retention time, reliability, footprint, capital investment, operational costs, etc. Next one, please. So I have to go a little bit more into wastewater treatment and recycling water. We basically use in wastewater treatment the same processes that we find in nature. Sedimentation, filtration, bacterial action, evaporation, sterilization. Everybody remembers the water cycle that we all learn when we are in school, 3rd grade or something like this.
Could you speak a little bit louder?
Sorry, yeah. So in wastewater treatment plants, we duplicate these processes, but we intensify them and we have them in a controlled space. I'm going to focus on the bacterial action. Next one, please. Now, Although I'm naming it bacteria, they are not really only bacteria. It's a highly diverse mix of bacteria, protozoa, fungi, algae, and even small insects are involved. And they feed on the organic matter of wastewater, and they clean up the water. Next one, please. Now, these bacteria can be classified into two groups: aerobe bacteria with air, anaerobe without air. From our kitchens, let's say, we know some examples of bacterial action when we make vinegar, yogurt, sourdough. These are aerobe bacteria. Similar, when we look around us in natural streams and oceans, in the upper layers, we find aerobe bacteria. In wastewater treatment system, we have treatments that are called activated sludge or trickling filter. On the other side, we have the anaerobe bacteria without air. Sauerkraut, wine, and beer that is made with them. You find them in stagnant ponds. You can identify them by the smell, a little bit of rotten eggs. Anaerobe bacteria we find in septic tanks, buffer reactors, etc. They are much slower than aerobe bacteria. They emit a strong odor, and they emit greenhouse gases, CO2 and methane. Next one, please. For this reason, I decided it was a system that would be most suitable to use a trickling filter. The trickling filter is a round tank that is open to the surface. It is filled with porous rocks, can be granite stone or volcanic stones. The rocks are supported with a floor that is perforated. And most important, we have openings on the side so that air can enter, so that our bacteria that are aerobe are happy and can breathe. Now the wastewater is being trickled onto this media and goes slowly through the filter media, comes out at the bottom. The bacteria are sitting on the stones, munching away on the pollution. Next one, please. So here's a list of the advantages of the trickling filter. The main point, I think, is that because aerobe bacteria are so much more active, that the system is more compact. That's why it has a smaller footprint, the lower costs are lower. We also have reasonably low maintenance. You don't need any special skills. There is no noise and very little odor. It has a short run-in time. That means you start operating the system. After 10 days, it will be fully functional. And in case there would be some heavy pollution, it is quite resilient and it will recover from any pollution quite quickly. Next one, please. So here we come now to the first case study, Courage Community. Is anybody here from Courage? I used to be. You used to be. You were there when we installed the filter? So Courage Community is about 100 residents. It's quite a pretty community, low-rise apartment buildings, green spaces, banana, papaya trees. There's a community orchard, they grow vegetables. Next one, please. So they had an existing wastewater treatment that was not functioning well. It was not, it was too small, it was not well designed. Residents complained about mosquitoes and bad smell. Next one. So we built a trickling filter for them. This is it. It has about 3 meter diameter at the bottom. Diameter, it is 3 meter high. We see on the top, we see the dispersing tank where the wastewater is being stored. And characteristically at the bottom, we see the opening for ventilation. Next one, please. This is a trickling filter from the top. And now if you slide over with your mouse, you can actually start a I should be able to. On the just here on the lower edge.
In this mode, I should take it out of the. Zoom in.
No. No, mine. If you just slide over the movie, it's a movie actually. There's no mouse. No? Here we go. So the trickling filter operates intermittently. We just came out of a dry phase, that's why it wasn't turning. Now the wet phase starts. The rotor is turning because the jets are oriented in opposite directions, so there's no motor involved. The water is being sprayed over the media.
How's it turning?
It's like a garden sprinkler because the jets are turned in opposite directions. So it will run as long until this top tank is empty for about 10 minutes. Then comes a dry period. The water will stop rinsing. It slowly percolates through, and in the next 10 minutes, fresh air from below can circulate through the filter. So
It needs to be open to the sky.
it's open to the sky. It's about 3 meters up.
And it's only granite gravel. What is it?
So the stone size is kind of important. You want to have as porous as possible stones.
Are these
But
ground stones or
this is just 1.5 inch granite.
chips? Gravel.
Yeah, gravel.
And that is quite big. This one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 50 centimeter is a good size, but it could be volcanic rock. It could be any stone that is locally available.
And it's only stones.
It's only stones, and
Oh,
the
I see.
water takes about 3-4 minutes to slowly go through the stones. And the bacteria that I showed earlier, they live on the surface of the stones. Next one, please.
Do you have to replace the stones
No.
sometimes?
So here we see actually the trickling filter in the background. This is an outflow from the trickling filter, and you can see in comparison to what we had before that there's a great improvement. Next one, please. So this water is being pumped now from the lotus pond. There's a pressurized system where there's 12 garden taps spread over the community. The sludge from the trickling filter is processed at site. The system runs automatically. We have one pump that needs to pump the water up into that top tank. At intervals, that's connected to a small UPS, so that even if there's a power cut, sometimes we have 1-day power cut, that the system will continue functioning.
Are there sort of food particles and stuff in the water?
This water is pre-treated already.
Filtered.
No, not filtered, just with a settler in front. This is a secondary treatment.
Like a grease trap.
Yeah, a settler. Construction took about 4 months, and the cost you will see per head was about 12,000 rupees per resident. The system is now working well since 4 years. Next one, please.
And it's fish in the pond alive
There's fish.
after
It's even- I
the
saw it.
trickling filter.
I saw a white heron that comes early in the morning and picks out the fish.
What's the diameter of the tank?
3 meters 50.
Great.
So it's key to have, I mean, because the water that comes into that sprinkler that turns round and round should not get clogged.
So the water is pre-treated already.
Yeah.
This is what would be called the secondary treatment
Yeah.
stage. No?
So it is very important to have that primary.
So we left the primary treatment as I had it, and we kind of just added on the system onto what was existing already. No?
Sorry, and this is gray water or including black?
No, everything. Everything that goes down the drain, they have washing machines, it's everything.
Sludge also.
Toilet.
Also, the flash toilet is going.
Everything, yeah. Now, we did a lot of testing of the water, and it has very good values. I see no harm in using it for unlimited irrigation. I'm not showing the test report, but what we did at the same time to give it a reference, we went to the Elen Shavadi Kolam behind the temple. We took a sample from here. People are washing their clothes in, they're bathing themselves. And our water, as it comes out of the trickling filter, is way better than that.
They large chemical.
And it's 100 people, it's 100 residents.
400 residents, yeah. Next one, please. Now comes the question, if a system like this can also be applied to small industries, in this case, Colors of Nature. Colors of Nature, we already said, is a dyeing unit that uses natural pigments. There are about 100 workers. There is now a toilet block being built. There's a small agricultural patch where you grow plants that you use in dyeing. Next one, please. Now, dyeing units have a very high water consumption. What happens after the cloth is being dyed, it needs to be repeatedly rinsed. The water consumption, 30 to 50 liters per kilo. This is not his actual consumption, this I've taken from the literature. And the other point is that 10 to 25% of the dyes actually remain in the water after the wash, and they cause discoloration of the water. Next one. So again, a trickling filter will be used for this secondary treatment. But now what we are going to do, rather than mixing all the water and sending it in one go through the trickling filter, we are pre-treating the water according to the requirements. So we have the water from the toilet blocks, which will go through a normal settler. We have in the dyeing unit itself the floor water. People walk in and out, there's quite some sand. There's soap from the washing of the cloth. There's some fat and wax residues from the cloth. So that needs to be removed. And we have the water from the actual dyeing vats, where we have to neutralize the pH and remove the residue pigments. Next one, please. Now we anticipate we will have a lot of recycled water. We have to see what can we do with it. So there is, of course, an option for the toilets that we use it to flush the toilets. This would require only medium quality, of course, for hand washing, and so we will continue to provide fresh water. We can use a portion of the recycled water for the agricultural patch, but the major significant water savings we can achieve if we manage to clean the water sufficiently that we can use it to rinse the freshly dyed cloth. At least for the initial rinses. The final rinse, maybe one continues to use pretty clear groundwater. So in order to get this higher quality of rinse water, we need to add a sand filtration and a disinfection unit behind the trickling filter. Next one, please. So this now, nobody can see anything. Anyways, through this approach, the system becomes somewhat more complicated than the first one that we saw, Courage Community. Number of tanks and the water goes different ways. So I think we can just skip to the next one.
How do you disinfect?
Disinfection we discussed. We have to disinfect in a way that it does not affect the quality of the dye. So we can, for example, not use chlorine. We debated whether UV would be good or ozoning. One could disinfect through heat also. We are still working on that aspect. Construction started 2 months ago. Here we see already the outer shell of the trickling filter with the characteristic holes for the aeration. Thank you.
So, sorry, the height of this, I'm sure you said it, but I forgot.
So this one is slightly larger. I think we have 4 meter diameter and about 3 meter
3
height.
meters. So it's like something around 2.5 meters of stone.
Yeah.
And all same size,
Yeah.
granite stone.
So this kind of trickling filters is nothing new. it's around, I would say, since about 50 years, and literally millions of them have been built. There have been the way of treating wastewater for basically half a century. They were in Western world, they have been replaced with this activated sludge systems because they are even more compact. But the drawback of activated sludge systems is that they need a lot of electricity. So this one is kind of low in electricity use and more adequate for Auroville, I would say, than the high-tech solutions that one finds sometimes in the US.
Jan, I think the name is confusing a little bit the people.
The trickling filter?
Yeah, because it's not
But
filter.
trickling. And
Actually,
inside,
it's not
inside
like
you have the filter material, no? It's not really filtering like a sieve. It is filtering in a way because the microbes are sitting on this material and they're eating the pollutants out of the water, no?
Actually, it's a bit interesting because the system that we use here is like the same concept. Actually, you just run through, you run the water through stones and sands,
Yeah.
and then the outcome is somehow filtered. But I'm just thinking that the small amount of water that I filter, and I use like 4 different sizes, and the last one is sand, so it's very small, it takes a bit more time, and then after that there is charcoal, and then there is also plants, and the water I get after all this, it's okay, it's good. I mean, it's not smelly, I can't drink it, but I can easily put it in a nursery and all. But I just suddenly I see that it's like a fifth of that work. Four step is gone and it's still working.
But what you were just now describing is similar to sand filter. Yeah. So this works completely different. This has a big rough stones, and what is working as a filter is not the fine media that is inside and prevents particles to actually percolate through. What is working as a filter is the bacteria that they sit on the rock. They build like a slimy skin around the rocks, no? And the water passes over those bacteria quite slowly, and the water comes out after a few minutes, and it's really, really clean, no? One thing to say, this filter, for example, it has to operate continuously. We have 10 minutes wet and 10 minutes dry, but if you would let it sit overnight dry, the bacteria would die off, and the next day you would get a horrible result. So this is operated continuously 24 hours.
Computer? How do you automatically like go off and on?
It's just a timer.
A timer?
Yeah, it's quite simple, the relay.
How do you deal with the pH?
So in this, in the system in Courage, pH was no problem because it's just domestic wastewater where the pH is normally 6.5 to 7.5. That's within the range of those bacteria. But for the dyeing unit, we have to be very careful that we adjust the pH so that it does not reach either too high or too low values.
So my question is like, is it like adding another mineral to the thing because to neutralize the pH, or?
So one possibility is, of course, that if you have a slight pH variation that you can dilute. That if you have some water that is a little bit too basic and you have neutral water, you just mix the same. This works to a certain extent. Then if, for example, we have been trying to raise the pH with lime water. One can also, in the dyeing unit, he uses firewood to boil the cloth. There's a lot of ashes. There's different ways to do that. But our approach now is that we say, okay, we go step by step. We are starting to deal with the water from the workers' toilet, with the floor water. Then we remove the pigments, then we need to adjust the pH. We have to see, do we actually need to raise or lower it? So it's a little bit premature to say.
Yeah, we're doing experiments till now, just now. And then, yeah, it's something we, like for example, the disinfecting, we have different options, UV or ozone. And then for neutralize the pH, if it's basic or acid, we have also different options. And then we look in then what is going to have more low impact. And then we doing experiments now. But the infrastructure is going to be the same. And then it's one very big buffer tank before coming the water here. And then this is what is said is going to be also dilute a little bit because it's the toilets for 100 people plus the dine unit. And then not all water is acids, mostly the dines. Sometimes they are acid like tannin or things like that. And then sometimes it's also alkaline. And then we see how to handle. But we're thinking we will not have very big problem, only to see what is the more low impact and cost effective. But always considering first the low impact.
It's also a question of cost, no? If you, I mean, in our minds we say, okay, something that is basic and so, and then you mix some acid, neutralize it, which happens, but you would have to buy the acid, no? And so it's also a question of operational costs. Whatever we can manage with what we have at the place is always preferable than bringing in chemicals to manage something.
We have crazy ideas now. Jan, I think, is doing experiments with carbonic acid from the chimneys to use the acid. And then, yeah, we are very sincere in the project. And then we will find the best ways to do it.
So you have in the flue exhaust of the wood fire, you have a lot of carbon dioxide, and when you percolate, you bubble the carbon dioxide from the chimneys through water that is slightly alkaline, you can neutralize the pH, for example, like that. At the same time, the flue gas is being purified. So,
What about adding microbes? What about adding microbes? Like,
about microbes?
yeah, what about adding them first?
So microbes, we just said we were initially, I mean, firstly, we have to achieve a level of treatment for the water that we can say it is okay to use it to rinse the dyed cloths. We'll have very stringent criteria there because that's what the whole unit lives off. We cannot afford to spoil the dyed cloths. So once we have reached that level, I think you rinse. How many times you rinse?
Yeah, natural dyes rinse more than chemical dyes because it's less attached to the fabrics. And then, but they always presume of this, the chemical dyes, but it doesn't matter who cares how much you rinse it if your water is not possible to use.
Yeah.
And then with our water treatment system we have make in 96, still is in use, we have enough quality for irrigation. But now is the question of reuse the water, is what we try to achieve.
So if there's, let's say, the dyed fabric is rinsed 5 times, and one would use the recycled water for the first 3 rinses, and fresh water only for the last 2 rinses.
And then, like in the rocks, like if you said like if it dries out completely, then the microbes would die. Like in sometimes when it does fail to like turn the water back on or something, could you like add externally like some microbes like?
They're there. They're there.
Yeah.
We are.
I mean,
we're ocean of
the microbes are quite amazing. You see, when I said we are adopting actually natural systems into this wastewater treatment, how can we adapt that? What we do is we create an environment, and in this environment that we create, because this is an aerobe environment, we will get the aerobe bacteria. We put a lid on top and we close the holes all around. in a month or so, we would have anaerobe conditions. So the aerobe bacteria would die or wither away, and then we would get different bacteria. So it takes about a week to 2 weeks for the system to run in. Once it is run in and this bacterial layer has built up, they are precious for us. No? We don't want any harm to come for them. So there is even a system that normally the dyeing unit will operate in the morning from 8 till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. After that, there is no more fresh wastewater. So what we do, we have, the other drawing, one can't see a thing on it, so I'm just indicating. We have at the outflow of the trickling filter, we have a big storage tank where we store the recycled water. And if there is no fresh wastewater coming in, there is a float valve that will open from the already cleaned water into the feed tank for the trickling filter and give us water that we can pump back onto the trickling filter. So even in the night, the trickling filter will operate, but it will recirculate water that has already been treated. And that is in order to keep our friends happy in there. So in all practicality, of course, there can be that there is a major failure or so, but it should work continuously and we should not allow it to dry out.
Do you have to flush it sometimes or something? Or
No.
does it require any real maintenance?
So there is, if you, it becomes a little bit too detailed. There is different types of trickling filter, and the build is all the same, but the way they are being operated differs. So this one is a low rate trickling filter. We are designing the size so that there is only very little water per square meter actually being rained on the trickling filter.
Oh.
You have also high rate trickling filters where basically the water at a much higher rate is being percolated onto the filter material, and in those you get occasionally a build-up of bacterial layer and also from the water the pollutants that the entire thing blocks. Nothing will go through anymore, it will actually overflow over the top. No? And in that case, you have to flush the trickling filter or you have to chlorinate it or something like this, but this does not happen in low rate trickling filter.
How does it change during different seasons? Because the microbes will be affected by weather?
No, I don't. In courage, we have not. We have experienced a little bit in summer that outlet pond with a lotus inside, it was getting a little bit too warm. So in summer, from March to June, July, we put a little bit of green shading net over so that the water is a little bit cooler. But on the filter itself, we have not observed any change from summer to winter.
So you actually have an excess wastewater, do you, at the end?
So in this case, for the dyeing unit, we have to see in how far we can manage our water balance. If we can manage to reduce the current water usage by half, I would say it would be a big success.
Yeah, I just got a question about the Courage community. What I understand is you need a certain type of water going into the trickling. The first stage of the filtering, could you a little bit talk about how it's been set up there and how like the hung particles being removed and
So
how...
Courage already had what is called a buffer reactor that was there since, I don't know who built it, 20 years. And we just continue using that. Whatever comes out of it, that goes into the trickling filter. So it's, one could say, a pre-treatment there through primary settler that takes away the flotsam and the settlables is already there. And then what goes in the filter is already pre-treated, but not very well. We have, for example, the nozzles that you could see, we need to clean them like, you know, with a little brush once a month because we do get some blockages sometimes. So the trickling filter is a secondary treatment, not recommended for fresh wastewater directly from whatever.
I'm actually curious, like when you put the dyed water, right, in its blue color or whatever color it is, and once you filter it through,
No,
what
it's,
is
as we don't explain them totally, but as Yanni say, we're going to segregate the waters, and then the water from the dye, we will only from the dye is not many liters. We will have 2 or 3 stainless steel tanks to precipitate the dye. Meaning, if we put betonite in the dye and a little bit maybe changing the pH, like this neutralizing, the dye is soluble because dye is soluble particles. They will come small particles. They're going to come insoluble, and then going to precipitate, and they're going to be pigments.
Like sediment.
Meaning pigment and dye is pigments is small particles, and dyes is soluble particles. And then in this case, they're going to precipitate, and then we together with the system also, we buy one press filter. We will pass this to the press filter, and we will have the pigments separate. Then the water, clean water, we will put to the system. The same thing with the mordants, with the iron, with the alum. We will precipitate them, and we will separate. Then with the alum, we will try to sell to the person who is selling us the alum, and the iron maybe in combination with the laboratory of Auroville, whatever, we will check how much we can put in the compost for the Auroville consume agriculture. And then in this way, again, the water from the mordants, alum and iron, the water from the dye is not going to go directly to the system. First, we're going to separate what we don't want in the system.
That's pretty cool.
And this way,
There's also that actually the dyes are very costly, no? Indigo, for example, no? So if it would, but then at one point, if you have a dyeing vat, it's too diluted, I guess, no? So if it is possible to recover the dye as a dye to be reused for you, also would be not bad.
this is more heavy work. We need to have more peace of mind with laboratory to try to do this. And then the more immediate solution I see is converting them as a pigments and try to selling them for holy, for example. Because holies don't need much quality, only need color.
Instead of the chemical colors for holy, now you get natural dyes.
Yeah, and then of course, if we have peace of mind, we can do also pastel colors with them. We can mix these pigments
Watercolor, anything.
with big wash or whatever, and then we can. Then depending on how much peace of mind and all this, we can have soot products from this water treatment system, valuable soot products. Yeah. Already we done this before, meaning already years ago I make pigments from the waters of the dyes, and we mixing them with casein and paint.
Yes.
And then we have still in our office one paint of our logo with precipitate pigments from the dyes of us and mixing with casein. It's like you say, it's nothing new. It's only meaning pigments from plants has been used already from hundreds of years. They're not very good in light fastness, but for interior, they're quite okay.
Can they be used for
Charlie.
walls?
Yes,
Like
for interiors, yes.
Yeah.
If his sun is catching this wall, the color will go.
So he says yes, but not outside where the sun comes, because they will bleach. It will bleach.
They are not very strong for lighting. This is also historic.
Because I have seen in India, like in the village, like they have mud wall and they paint with a blue color, Mela, and yellow or geru, something like
Yeah, geru. Maybe they use gerus.
also the yellow one I have seen in
Yeah, but most part they use geru. It's traditional also in North India, the turmeric, but the turmeric don't last.
You were telling about the cow pee, no?
Maybe I'll show you like how they
Yeah.
have it.
You know what they use in Germany? Cow blood.
What?
Blood of cows for the traditional, for the traditional, you know, the framework structures. Traditionally, they were using blood.
For the red.
Yeah,
If we
And it
got,
doesn't it oxidize
but it gets kind of very dark red, you know, ox blood.
and who not hear about the cow urine, the yellow from cow urine?
Yeah, I know. They feed them with mango leaves for
Exactly.
years.
One of the more famous yellows from the painters
Oh, yeah?
is made by cow urine feed with mango leaves only.
So you feed the cows with mango leaves,
No.
and then you get the perfect yellow. Yeah.
Now
They
it's not
die in
allowed- now
5
it's not allowed
years.
because
They die in how? 5 minutes?
5, 6, very soon, yeah.
they don't allow it anymore. One of
The cows don't survive over.
No, they don't survive.
No, because they've been fed just with mango, which is very rich in tannin and like it's very
Okay,
acidic.
okay.
But it's one of the famous pigments from the big artists of Europe and everywhere.
Indian yellow.
Yeah, Indian yellow. Anyway, this we don't use in the colors of nature. It's a pigment. We use in lines.
Well, in the olden days, I think they used urine also for as a mordant. No?
Yes.
Yes, and cow dung, very important. Cow dung is so important in the dyeing.
Yeah.
Very important. In fact, so important in Europe, they learn everything from west, from east. They have cows in the dyeing unit to have the cow dung. Mm.
What color
Very
does
important.
that
No, fixing the colors.
Cool.
Very important. We use it. Cow dung. And it's scientific, meaning after they found and they found substitutes to the cow dung, meaning we're speaking about the 1800s in Europe and America. They study all these processes and they found substitutes to the cow dung. But in fact, many people thinking the cow dung is better than these substitutes. Cow dung in other places artisanal, sheep dung. In other places has been used traditionally in India. Camel, even elephant, with the same purpose.
A question here, just little bit changing the subject. Do you, as an Auroville unit, do you pay for the water?
Yes.
Okay, so this is when you look at the cost, right, of production. This is, you said that the usage of the water is quite high, right?
It's
So-
quite high. I consider because I think it's artificially high. But anyway, I consider as a contribution to the other neighbors that they use the same wells as a social contribution. Like for example, I like to pay a little more the firewood as a little contribution to the Auroville forest. I don't check the kilos because the people sending me because I know community put a little less water. I don't care. I consider as a little bit my small grain of sand, no, to what we try to do here.
Okay, so that's.
And I think I cannot do more now. I wish one day I can do more.
Well, the energy level, I have many more graphs like that, but it would have got too long. The energy level, the system to recycle the water is about 1/3 of the energy you need to pump the water from 60 meters to the surface and then into a tank. So you save a lot of energy. You should actually save quite some money on the.
Yes.
With the investment now for the capital investment, of course, it will probably take 20 years.
Really cool way of filtering water.
Yeah, I am proud to.
But this was an interesting point. If one compares to the sun filter, and you also made it, no, this does not physically filter by media so that removes debris or something like this. The filtration is more that the organic pollutants are being removed because the bacteria are actually eating it up.
I actually wanted to know if it's possible to dye hemp.
That's another question. We're doing already.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have hemp we buy hemp from different suppliers, and then we wish can we have soon hemp from Auroville, grow in Auroville, and indigo. We buy more than 1,000 kilos of indigo per year in Tindibanan. It's growing between Tindibanan and Gingy. And this we give there more than 200 acres is growing for us. Imagine if it's done this in Auroville.
200 acres to grow
1,000 kilos of
1,000 kilos of indigo.
Yeah.
Better if it's far away from Auroville, actually.
No,
But
this
it's
is
very good
Gingy.
because it doesn't need much water. You know, it's a good plant. We have some wild indigo here almost in Akashwa.
I tried to organize last year with Auroville groups to do this in Auroville, and I don't succeed.
Yeah, because in Auroville there's a bad reputation for all the pot smokers and everything already. And then there's like the whole, I don't know.
Yeah, but this is indigo. This is no hemp. And hemp is nothing to do also with what you say.
Oh, you wanted to plant hemp?
Maybe wait till another secretary comes.
Yeah, there are. I think that I'm aware of. There are 2 or 3 different waste treatment plants in Auroville. And there's like the Maitreya one, which is you know, I think we had a look at Francois and Natalie's one, you know, in situ. And like the same, and also Chaitany's one and Tensi's one. That's one. That also treats black water.
So we have from the main wastewater treatment plants in Auroville city area, there is 2 systems. In the 80s, this root filter, planted filter became very popular. Harold Kraft.
Did they come from Harold Kraft?
This came from Harold Kraft, but then people just copied it.
But it always seemed to end up smelling. Was it a problem?
They all smell, yeah.
They are all anaerobic.
So the reason that they smell is, anyway, just to stick to the other one. So this is one type of system. The other one has been developed by CSR, Tensi and Co. They do this buffle reactors.
It is geobilico, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
this is Maitreya and
yeah. So both systems normally take black water, the entire water, no? But both systems, I personally find the treatment result is not very good. With a planted filter, actually the only one that I found when I did the study, which is 4 years ago, worked quite good, is just as adjacent to Arati, that is
the round one. Is it?
Not surrender, no.
Not the one
basically at the level of the big elephant tank. No, there in the back is one treatment that was
David Nightingale.
No,
that one was drained.
That was built by Rolf when Rolf was still doing. Yeah, exactly. So of the planted filters, that's the only one that I found that is actually really working well. But the community is also spending a lot of money, maintenance, cutting continuously the reeds and this and that. No, all the other ones that I surveyed, 25 of them, they're all flooded, terrible in solar kitchen, smell, collapsing walls. No.
But in Creativity also it was damaged in like 2005 something.
Okay.
It was flooded.
Also, then you look at the town hall, for example. No, that thing, it's standing there full of mosquitoes, and it's a horrible mess. And plus, there's no water coming out that can be used for anything.
But there's a huge water harvesting tank in the town hall, isn't it? You know, there's Filio told us that he and Harold Kraft are part of it.
200,000 litre rainwater tank under the ground in the town hall.
Luxury.
It's not being used,
Not
or,
being
or
used,
they
yeah.
in minimal use because
Yeah.
because it's
I would love to have that. It's such a luxury. Meaning, what is the cost of that?
So what's your idea of long-term waste treatment, like for Auroville? Do you think this Maitreya thing is a legitimate solution, or
So see, in that study that I was talking about, that was actually the basis to design the sewage system along the Vikas radial.
right?
So that goes back on the study where we said all those little systems where one community, where the residents don't have the inclination to look after the system, take care of it, to make it
Shouldn't that
operational.
be mandatory that they do that?
But we said, look guys, we give you a sewage system, you connect to it, the water is being treated, the treated water comes back to your community and you can use recycled water in your community.
Right.
But then what happened is I started building the sewer and the return pipe system. Then how things move in Auroville, Lavinier changed, and then CSR kind of stepped in, and I had actually designed the system with a trickling filter at the end. And
Where was that supposed to be?
where the system is now, that's in the triangle of Sukravati, Shanga. There's a treatment system now. No?
The backside of
Yeah.
Maitreya.
So there was supposed to be a trickling filter as per the design, but then somehow things changed and they put a CSR.
But you can't treat black water, can you, in a trickle filter?
No, I will always pre-treat it. I will pre-treat it simple
Simple
primary
decantation.
Like a
treatment.
septic tank.
Yeah, simple decantation.
Okay, so you took a normal septic tank and took that water and put it through a trickle filter.
Then you
Because like I grew up with septic tanks. The septic tank is a conventional in Australia. Nobody questions the septic tank. When you study architecture, they teach you how to make a septic tank, and they say that's the solution. But then Jurio and all these guys, they say, yeah, but man, that's only 70% efficient. What you're putting into the ground finally is still 30% bacterial.
No, but here in this kind of scenario, this is fully okay. It becomes problematic when you are really in the residential zone. I think there's now 2,000 people living there, and there's wells in the vicinity. Then the septic tank becomes problematic.
Yeah.
And if you want to reuse the water.
Anyway, small trickle filter for the small communities is not much cost also.
So there is it's a little bit problematic. There is kind of a minimum size. The ones in Courage and also the one for you, they would be considered quite small already. I don't think one could actually make it much smaller.
Trickle filter.
One is a trickling filter. No? So I would think a community minimum would be 60 people. Otherwise, it also doesn't become efficient anymore. No? So in the West, where they have been used for 50 years, they have trickling filters, one trickling filter for 50,000 people. No? It has 25-meter diameter and same concept, and all the water goes through there. But small doesn't always work.
If you take like a tray of your effluent and just leave it standing for a month or something, what happens? Does it start to smell or?
A lot, because for example, this is our water treatment system till now. If we put everything there, if we put all the dyes there, the dyes is like a soup. It's soup of plants. They have a lot of nutrients.
Right.
And then they fermenting like a crazy. Maybe soup, lot of sugars. They fermenting like a crazy. They also becoming also particles. The sludges grow very fast, and lot of gas is coming out. Lot of gas. Rotten egg smell.
Gas.
Yeah. I saw them
Because it's all anaerobic,
Yeah. methane and carbon dioxide.
And then we have 19 years experience in running one
Smells.
water treatment system based on anaerobic bacteria, and I don't see how to do better with that. I am really happy Jan introduced me to the aerobic bacteria system.
Right. So, but to your question now, if you take a big bucket of this stuff, no?
Yeah.
And you just leave it stand there, top open.
Yeah.
The surface on top is not big enough for enough oxygen to get in, so
No
the
fish
entire
living.
thing will turn anaerobe. But that substrate sitting there will somehow attract bacteria that like that stuff, no?
Okay.
So I don't think much would happen in 1 month. It would bubble, it would stink, anaerobe digestion or whatever. But let's say after 1 year, you would probably have decanted on top, you would have more or less clean water. At the bottom, you would have some sludge that doesn't have much smell anymore. Also. But it would take about 1 year.
Okay.
Now, if you
Even
would,
the dye, the blue dye would.
yeah, because the indigo is organic also, no? It would be only chemical dyes that would not.
Right. Yeah, because the particles of indigo are quite
Yeah.
large relatively.
But they would get decomposed into whatever other substances, base substances. But it would take a year for 1 barrel, no?
Right,
So the
yeah.
aim is to, how do we deal now with
Hey, speed
thousands
up.
of liters per day?
Yeah. How many liters a day are you dealing with?
40,000 liters,
40,000.
2 tanks of 20,000 liters
And are you recycling any of that now?
for the garden. For the garden is good.
Oh, no, for the garden, but there's 40,000 goes for the garden.
No, I don't reuse. I have problem.
Huh?
I don't have this big garden,
No,
and the material is not nearby.
but
and then,
you're growing indigo though, are you?
and then it's percolating. I make big hole and allow to percolating. I am really not happy about that. This is why I urge into with the first rupees after many years to struggling with the first rupees we make. I really go fast to try to do something better with the water treatment system.
Okay.
And this area is also, it says it's Money Valley clay, no? So
Yeah.
actually water also doesn't go very well into the ground.
Right.
So in the rainy season, a lot of stagnating water.
Yeah, you're talking it floods the road outside. Do you guys want to stay for lunch? There's lunch here.
Oh,
Yeah,
great, thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.